Hello everybody, Ryan Kurzak here of Asheville Vedic Astrology. I've got two videos that I want to share with you, and they deal with how to learn astrology. This is a question that's come up very often, both in the spring semester class this year, as well as just people sending me questions to my email. So the first video we're going to look at is going to just review some books that might be helpful for you, some helpful books on astrology, and that'll be this video. The next video in this short little series will just simply share my reflections on the best approach to astrology. Learning astrology from books, from teachers, from courses, and the realistic amount of time that it might take to gain capacity to read a chart well and to understand and hold in your mind the numerous principles that are required to understand astrology when you look at a chart, that you can get good information versus, say, focusing on one particular point and trying to judge the whole chart from there. We need to look at it holistically. So that'll be the second video. But this first video, I have 11 books. Now these are 11 books that I picked out of my own personal library, and there's quite a lot more books in my library. But these 11 are the ones that, they're the first ones that come to mind when I remember learning astrology. They're the first ones that come to mind that I still use as reference books from time to time, and that I still study quite frequently, especially some of the older texts like Vedic Astrology or Shastra. So let's begin. So the first book we want to consider is Graha Sutras. This is by Ernst Wilhelm. I did not get this book until I was already practicing astrology regularly, but after I read it, it became one of my favorites because it focuses on a lot of the primary principles, the fundamentals of astrology, understanding what the planets represent, understanding how they function within a chart. Now in this book, it's a hardback. It is based on Vedic Astrology or Shastra, but it covers the avatars of the grahas, the Samya and Kura grahas, the self-aspects of the grahas, the planetary kingdoms, the presiding deities, gender, caste, gunas, it goes on, the Sapta Dhatus, the luminous and starry grahas, the mineral, planet, and animal kingdoms. So we need to keep all these things in mind whenever we are assessing a chart. So this is an excellent book to begin your study of astrology. Again, Graha Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm. Now, as you'll learn in my next video, this is not a book on technique, but this is a book on primary principles, the things you have to have in order to understand an astrological equation. Why do I focus on that? Because a lot of people just start studying astrology and they want to know immediately how to read a chart, when they really don't understand that there is a enormous equation that you have to keep in your mind in regards to astrology. And each of those variables you have to learn separately. And when you're first starting, you want to put the variables together to get good information. But some of those variables, you just need to learn them by themselves first, because only when you know 10 or 12 of these variables are you able to put them into the equation and get valid information. So these first few books that I'm recommending are specific, not to technique, but to the fundamental principles that you need to understand for astrology and practicing astrology. Okay, so Graha Sutras. The next book. This is one that a lot of people probably have read and are very familiar with. David Frawley's Astrology of the Seers. This was probably one of the first books, well, not one of the first books, but very close to one of the first books I got specifically on Vedic astrology. When I did take David Frawley's Ayurveda and astrology course that he offers. This is an excellent book, again, for fundamentals, for principles, for understanding the planets, for understanding the signs. It's more of what I would consider to be, if it was a course, it'd be a survey course, because it just gives you basic terminology. And when you first read it, if you're not used to studying astrology, in and of itself is going to feel a little bit overwhelming. But these are things that we have to learn. He does touch upon the methodology of Vedic astrology. He touches upon remedies, healing remedies, and there are sample charts in this book. So this is another excellent book to have in your library. Astrology of the Seers by David Frawley. Now, the next book we have may be familiar to you. It's a book I wrote or co-wrote with Richard Fish, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology Foundation Course. And both of the books within this series, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, I personally still use it myself as a reference from time to time, because it encompasses those fundamental principles once more. And this book was created specifically to be a correspondence course. Richard Fish, who first seeded the idea, and he put forth quite a lot of the material in the first book. It was a correspondence course that he used with his students. I even took the correspondence course with him. So it's set up in such a way that you learn as though you are taking a course. So incrementally, step by step, which is why I do very much enjoy this book. When I teach classes, this is one of the books that I teach from most often, because it goes over the houses, it goes over the planets, it goes over Vargas, it goes over ascendants, talks about the nakshatras, the Vimshatari Dasha. But again, it's still a survey book, much like David Frawley's book, Astrology of the Seers. But it's got excellent fundamental principles in it. Now, the next book I'd like to advise, it's probably one of my all-time favorites, as you can tell how it's falling apart. You can tell I've used it quite a bit. It's kind of nasty here along the pages where I flipped through it for years and years and years. But this is Beneath a Vedic Sky by William Levesey. Beneath a Vedic Sky by William Levesey. This is another survey book, so it's another introductory book. However, he does go into some deeper principles. He doesn't call them this, but they are the Parashara Bhava Yogas, such as planets in the first house, the third lord in the fourth house, Saturn in the first house. And this can be very helpful when you are starting to research charts. I mean, once you've gone through those 3 books that we just discussed, now you know what the principles are, you know in a sense how they work, you have a general idea of it. And now you want to know, well, what could it mean having these different combinations? And we have to remember that these kinds of books are not meant to be your sole source for giving readings. They're just meant to encourage you to think like an astrologer. So, for example, when you open up and you read conjunction of Mars and Mercury, well, favorable conjunction is clever, quick-witted, good speaker, has a mind for engineering, mechanical occupations, and medical work, quick problem-solving ability. The unfavorable, very stimulated mentally, mind moves very fast, angry moods, needs to stop and think things through, and so on. So they give you an idea of what exactly you're supposed to be considering when you're looking at conjunctions of planets or conjunctions of house lords and so on. But really, that's just to kind of prime the pump for your own astrological understanding to come in to play here. And it does require that you have some background in astrological technique. Because otherwise you might read a certain aspect, ruler of the 5th and the 11th, and you read profits and good success from the grace of previous actions. Well, that might not be true, particularly if the planet that is the ruler of the 5th and the 11th is Saturn. So you kind of have to know how to understand what the planets mean first, because that will give you a much better understanding of how to use this book. But this is a great book. He touches upon Ashtaka Varga, touches on transits, nakshatras. There's even a small section in the back on Vastu. So one of my all-time favorites. I need to get another copy, I think, because I do like having it around. But that's Beneath the Vedic Sky by William Levesey. Okay, so that takes us almost through the beginner books. The 5th book that I particularly enjoyed as I was learning astrology was Light on Life by Hart Defoe and Robert Svoboda. Hart Defoe and Robert Svoboda. This is another excellent book on fundamentals. He has quite a lot of deeper insights as well that I didn't necessarily find in some of the earlier books. But they all build upon each other. You want to have all of these in your library, because you read one, you read the other, you get so many different perspectives that it starts to create a framework within your mind. So you get a mental reference library within your mind. And that's the way you want to have it. Because then when you start using techniques, you have all of this information to draw upon. but we'll get more into the learning aspect in the next video. Okay, so continuing on. Now we are moving into what I would consider to be the more intermediate or advanced books. And again, I come back to my own book that Richard Fish and I co-wrote, which is The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2. This book goes over Lajatadiya Avashtas, it goes over Baladiya Avashtas. We talk about the Parashara yogas, the Bhava yogas. It explains very in detail how to assess Avashtas. There's sections on how to properly use the Navamsha, the Dasamsha, the Vargas, and as well as Prajna and relationship astrology, compatibility astrology. So there's a lot within this book, which is why I put it more in the intermediary section. And most of this work within this book came from classes and courses that were taught. So it's actually course material that was put into book format. And my favorite part of this book, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to put it all together, is the appendix. Because in the appendix, it goes over the astrological indications of every planet in each house. Meaning that, for example, Venus can represent strength and recuperative ability in the first house. Jupiter can represent spiritual art and written wisdom in the third house. It goes over the specific planetary indications in each Varga as well. For example, in the Hora, Mars can indicate gold, gems, mineral wealth. In the Chaturtamsha, the moon can indicate the ability to accept fortune, wealth from silver, opals, and pearls. In the Dasamsha, Mercury shows a capacity to manage power and authority. Saturn's the ability to work hard, a fall from position, or stay in power. And so it goes up to the D30, the Trimsamsha, and that's actually a very good Varga to consider because that is a Varga for health. So there's numerous indications within the appendix of this book that speak to health-related situations, how each planet represents an organ, a tissue, an Ayurvedic constitution within the chart. And then the final appendix, a detailed step-by-step method of chart analysis, which is about 14 pages long. But again, all this is, once you have a sense of certain principles and how to put them together, now you need to figure out what is a good framework to do that in. This book does a good job in that regard, and I'm actually pretty proud of it for that reason. So it goes over time cycles, Bhava charts, planetary states, the non-luminous and subplanets, subtleties of the divisional charts, named yogas, Shadbala, relationship compatibility, introduction to Lajatadiya Avashtas, house lord combinations, planetary Karakas and Vargas, and Prajna astrology. So a lot of stuff you need to know is in this book. And again, this is The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, by Ryan Kurzak and Richard Fish. Okay, the next book we're getting more into some classics here. I love Prajna. Prajna is a wonderful method of astrology. Both to practice, it's extremely accurate. It's probably the most accurate astrology I've ever done. And it helps you learn how to read a chart in general. So the book, Prajna Tantra, Horary Astrology by B.V. Raman. It's a small book, but it's one I refer to and read often. It's got a lot of great material in here. So again, that's Prajna Tantra, Horary Astrology by B.V. Raman. There's a lot of good examples in here about how to use Prajna, as well as very effective principles to get good information from a Prajna chart or a horary chart. Another book on Prajna, as you can tell I like Prajna, is Prajna Marga. So Prajna Marga, let's see, where's the publisher on this one? This is from Ranjan Publications, translated by J.N. Bison. There's just too much to tell you about this book. This book gets into esoteric principles, it gets into specific principles of Prajna. This is one of my go-to books for astrology and Prajna specifically. So you can't go wrong with Prajna Marga or even Prajna Tantra in that regard. But it is getting more into what I would call advanced books, because these are old books. They were written in a different time period, so you have to be able to think symbolically with a lot of the things that they share. And oftentimes, people will try to treat these books literally. And there is a time and a place for that. But when we start to get in these old books, we always have to remember that thinking symbolically is very important. Because if you can't do that, you're going to miss and not be able to understand a lot of what's within these books. Okay, next book we have is a book on nakshatras. I have another book on nakshatras. I believe it's by Dennis Harness. It's also very good. I think it's called The Nakshatras. I couldn't find it. It's somewhere in my stacks of books. But that is an excellent book on the nakshatras. This book, 27 Stars, 27 Gods, The Astrological Mythology of Ancient India, by Vedic Astrology. Essentially, this is a book that goes over the mythology of the nakshatras, which is very important. It helps you understand how they work and how they function. So this should be pretty much in anyone's library, I believe. And one of the ways that you can start to use it is just find out what nakshatra your planets are in, your lagna, your moon, all of your planets, and get a sense of the energy of the nakshatra and see how that might be helping your lagna, your path in life, or your moon, or the sun, or Mars, or Mercury, how that might be determining how those planets grow into your life, how you cultivate them, because the energies of the nakshatras will show that. So again, this is 27 Stars, 27 Gods, The Astrological Mythology of Ancient India. A couple more books here. Another one of my all-time favorites, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. This again is an older book. It is essentially considered to be, as they say here, the gospel book of Hindu astrology, with master key to divination. It's a 2-volume book. This is volume 2. But it's a 2-volume book, 2-volume series, and it starts at the very beginning of what you need to know astrologically and takes you through all the techniques you need to know. You need to be able to have some foundation in astrology, because if you don't, this book can be extremely overwhelming to you. So that's why I advise going through the previous books first, and then you get to Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, and then it can start to make more sense. And you also probably want to learn the techniques from another astrologer, because they can be complicated, they can be hard to understand, and they're very detailed, which is what will make you a very good astrologer, because no longer are you just going to say, well, my moon is in Revati, so therefore I have this experience. You're going to realize that there's about 20 other things you have to look to figure out why you might have that experience, and all of it's going to be found within Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. And the version I particularly like is the Ranjan publications. I also have another version, but this one I enjoy quite a bit more. And finally, it's last but not least in regards to astrological books, but just to keep the video manageable and you'll have plenty to read after this, Sarvarta Chintamani. This is another one of my all-time favorites. Another book that you need to be able to think symbolically, and you also need to be able to think abstractly as well as concretely. And that's one of the prime necessities to think like an astrologer. To think abstractly, yet also concretely. This book is similar to Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. It doesn't go into as many techniques, but it does speak to how to consider various houses, various ruling periods, as well as Rahu and Ketu's influences, Raj Yogas, the span of life. So this is, you might want to try this one out before you get to Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. But all of these are going to be wonderful to add to your library, wonderful to read, to study, because they'll expand your mind, they'll let you see the breadth, the depth of astrology, and will help you become much better at interpreting and accessing astrological information, and that's really the goal. So as far as books go, start here. In the next video, we'll talk about how to go beyond books, or how to supplement your studies with books while taking classes, learning from teachers, and also your own personal practice. Okay, thank you very much.